Next, we're going to take a look at population and sample. So as we look through population and sample, it's important to know what we're talking about as we go through this particular piece. Population and sample represent uh, the groups that you're particularly interested in. So in this particular situation, a population is all of the individuals or all of the items that belong to a certain group that you happen to be studying. Whereas a sample is the small group of individuals or items that represent the large population. Okay, and they have to be a good representation. They have to be reflective of all of the pieces ideally. Okay, so you want the sample to represent the total population. Okay, and oftentimes you're going to do a sample because it's cheaper and it's faster and it's easier to find information on a sample of the population than of the entire population as a whole. There are certain circumstances under which you want to know information from every single member of the population, and that particular situation is called a census. Okay, and in a census, every single person or every single item from that population is being surveyed. The drawback is that even though it's incredibly thorough and you get the best information from a census, it's also very expensive and it takes a really long time. And so it's rare that an entire census is actually done. So for example, the government of Canada does a population census every 10 years. Okay, because it would be impractical to try and get information on the entire population of Canada every year. It'd be way too expensive, would take way too long to process all the information. So in this particular situation, we have Mina, who wants to know which band Ontario high school students think is the best. Okay, her friend Sarah goes to a different school, and they each choose to survey students in their own school. So Mina uses the completed survey from both schools to draw conclusions. So let's just change that. From both schools to draw her conclusions. Okay. And so first off, we want to identify both the population group and the sample group. So again, the population is the total group of people that she's interested in. Okay. And so in this case, Mina wants to know which band Ontario high school students think are the best. Okay. So her population that she's really interested in, she wants to know what Ontario high school students think. So we can put in Ontario high school students. Okay, now it's simply impractical to try and survey every single student in Ontario. Okay, it would take way too long and it would take way too much money to be able to actually do that. There's no way that two people could conduct that type of uh, an investigation. So instead, she decides she's going to figure out a sample of the population. So her friend goes to a different school and they each survey students at their own school. We don't know how many students that they've surveyed. We don't know what their survey technique is, how they chose the people who are surveyed and whatnot. But they've sampled people at two schools. Okay, so so the sample here is students from two different schools. Okay, so I'm going to do this one in green. So they each survey students at their own school. Okay, so students from two different high schools are surveyed. I'm just going to put HS for high schools. Okay, so students from two different high schools happen to be surveyed. Okay, so is this particular sampling technique representative? Okay, yes or no? Okay, and I would argue actually that this particular sampling technique is not representative. Okay, and the way I would say that it is not representative, I'll just do that one in red. Okay, and it's not a representative survey, or a representative sample rather, because we don't know anything about how those people were selected. We don't know where those schools are. And so we only have two high schools. The sample size is not large enough. Okay, so only two schools. Okay, we don't know where those schools are or the demographic makeup of those schools. So we obviously didn't ask everybody, so we don't know where those and we don't know where those schools are. So where are the schools? Okay, so for example, um, musical choice from downtown Toronto is going to be different than musical choice from people in Thunder Bay, okay, or from rural areas like Fergus, okay. So it's not necessarily the best sample. We don't know how many people were asked. So how many people were asked and why, okay, or so how were people chosen? How were people chosen for the survey? Okay, was it convenient? Was it simple random? Was it some kind of cluster technique? Who knows? Okay, so this kind of leads us to our next point here, and the final point that I want to leave off with here is that the when the results of a survey or of an investigation don't actually reflect the population, the survey is said to contain bias. We'll talk more about bias in the next lesson. But very quickly, bias can be caused usually by one of three things. Okay, either the group that is being surveyed is not representative of the population. The wording of the question in a survey could be misleading, okay, or it could try to get the respondent to say a certain answer, okay, or the person who is conducting the survey could misinterpret the information, okay, or they could misrepresent something. So, for example, if I say, 30% of football players think that the green jersey is the best jersey. Okay, well, that's great, but that means that 70% of football players surveyed did not think that the green jersey was the best jersey, and therefore, if I'm trying to highlight one specific thing, perhaps my personal bias is showing through. Okay, so that's just a quick summation of the idea of population, sample, and whether or not it's going to be representative. So again, population is the whole group that you're interested in, that you're finding information about. Sample is a small group of people that represents that population. And in rare cases, you can do a census, which is where you ask questions of the entire population as a whole.